Hello, Peter4790 Cyrus here, and welcome to another rendition of Cyrus Gaming Corner, a gaming podcast where I, Swordfish1390, and Force Reviews talk about various gaming topics. Whether it be old games and new games, every topic is fair game. So, how are you guys' evening going so far?
Good. Always looking forward to talk about some nice retro RPGs from PS2.
As for myself, I'm doing great, playing Elden Ring, getting my butt whooped in the game, having a blast.
So, for today's episode, we're gonna talk about the Xenosaga series. So, I guess we should start out with discussing our experience with the Xenosaga series. For me personally, I first got the first game just browsing through the game, browsing through the counter when it was fairly recent. Like I didn't even heard of the game before, but I just saw the cover and it had this really cool shot of Cosmos, and so I bought that. Beat it eventually, and I like what I played of it, so I bought Xenosaga 2, which I didn't like as much. And then because I didn't like it as much, I didn't even bother with Xenosaga 3. It wasn't until like many years later, like this year, that I played through Xenosaga 3. In fact, starting last year, like very early last year, I played through Xenosaga 1, 2, and 3. So, yeah. How about your guys' experience with the series so far?
So I first got exposed to it way back, like not long after it came out. So I was still very, very young. I was into RPGs, but considering how young I was, I still wasn't like very refined at the genre. Like I said, I wasn't, I was still kind of learning the ropes. So my one cousin, who was also super into RPGs, he had a copy of it, and both we were both about the same age. So at the time, Xenosaga has a very elaborate and complex storyline that we'll obviously talk about later. So neither of us really knew what the hell was going on in the story. So now, to my 13-year-old brain, all I saw was, ooh, look, a turn-based RPG in space. That's all I thought it was. And I was like, oh, this is cool. So then, I got it at GameStop one day, and I played some of it, and I was like, oh, cool. Like I said, I was like, it's just what I thought it was, turn-based RPG in space. So years would go by, and I'd eventually get more exposed to them. The games would start to come out one by one. It got to a point where I did play most of the trilogy. I want to say like in 2015 or so. I played throughout. I beat the first two and stopped about halfway through three, and I didn't really like it that much at the time, only because I just was not understanding the story. The story was way too confusing to me at the time. So fast forward a couple more years, I want to say like 2018 or 2019 maybe, I finally, for some reason, decided to play them all again, all three of them. I beat all three of them, and being a lot older and being able to kind of follow the more intricate stories in the genre, I managed to wrap my head around all the themes and messages and got all the twists and things like that. And honestly, I was blown away by it. I could not believe like just how well crafted this whole trilogy was, despite some missteps in gameplay, which obviously we'll talk about that too. But I absolutely, once I finally understood the plot, I was really into it. I consider it to be like one of my favorite like RPG stories of all time. And then I even played it a second time about maybe a year later, and I loved it even more. I actually ended up getting even more of a newfound respect for it. So yeah, I kind of go way back with Xenosaga, but it's been a long ride. But having beaten the whole trilogy all the way through twice, I absolutely love it. So yeah, it's one of my favorites.
I would probably say that, considering that the game is supposed to like squish in what they originally planned for the entire series, I think it's pretty understandable why it was confusing when you first played through it.
Yeah. I mean, and there's between that and like kind of like all the jargon at the time. Like I was a very young teenager when I first got exposed to it. So I just it went way over my head. But like I think as time went on, it started to make more sense to me too. And plus, like you said too, like they cut the series short too.
It's
So
supposed to be a 6-game series, right?
Yeah. It was six was the original plan. I think like development of two. I think that's when they ended up having to make compromises and then cut it down to three.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Forrest?
A friend of mine in high school, we were out one night at the mall. He bought me a copy of Xenosaga, and that was my first exposure to the game. That game, I got it not at release, might have been a little bit after. I think it might have been out for maybe a few months. Didn't get a chance to beat it because my PS2 was not working properly, and so I eventually was able to play it after I got my PS2 replaced. But I had to flip my PS2 upside down for the game to work because it was a dual layer disc. At that point, I met some new friends at a new school I went to because I transferred, and the second game was coming out. Come to find out, this new friend I made in high school, the new high school I went to, he was into Xenosaga, and he had told me how much the first game was good, but I had never finished it up until close to when the second game came out, and so we started comparing our JRPGs that we had in our collections at home, and realized that we were pretty excited about the Xenosaga too, so we picked it up day one. And I remember getting the strategy guide for the game that came with the soundtrack. The soundtrack in two was great, especially the musical selections or the singing portions, actual vocal songs in the game were really good. So that was worth picking up the book for that game. The strategy guide was to get the soundtrack. Now, I'm not going to go into detail about two yet until we talk about it, but it is considered the weakest of the series. Um, but I still enjoyed it for the story, specifically in the direction they were going to go with the six-part trilogy originally. But really, where I think the series shined the most was the time constraints they had and the budget they had to try to make a coherent and at least a conclusion story to something that originally was supposed to be six games into just the third part of the game. So I played part three the day of release and reading magazines about the game not coming to America to it coming out to the US. Me and my friend were excited. So I remember a lot of people don't know this, but Xenosaga 3 when it released was $39.99 new in the US. It was not released at the standard $49.99 price like all other PS2 games were. It actually came out at a budget price of $39.99. The fact that game goes for over $300 now just shows how valued that game has gotten over the past decade and a half. And there's a good reason why that game is respected so much today. As they mentioned, as Peter and Sword mentioned, specifically the third game and specifically the trilogy, it's just a great series. Overall, it has fundamental things that attribute to one of the best stories ever made, even with its shortcomings being shrunken into three games. But that doesn't mean that these games don't have flaws, and obviously we'll talk about that. But I actually played these games, besides the first one, which was only a couple of months, I played these games at release day. I bought every strategy guide to every single game from 1 to 3. I even have the pre-order bonus art book that came with Xenosaga 3, which is very rare. The art book is amazing. Because I remember pre-ordering it, getting the art book when it released. And they didn't do pre-order bonuses for part 2, but the third game did get a pre-order bonus. And they followed the same formula with the strategy guide. The strategy guide also contained the soundtrack for the third game. So those are pretty rare. If you ever run across those strategy guides with the soundtracks in the back of the books, highly recommend picking them up as they are extremely hard to find. So, but yeah, that's it. I want to try to get us to the next section of where we talk about the story because that's really where I want to kind of go more into that. But that's just my history with the series.
Okay. Xenosaga 1. It's the beginning of a trilogy. Or, it's the beginning of what's supposed to be a 6-game series. And for what it does, I think it does that job extremely well. It introduces the setting really well. It does a really great job of introducing each main character. And not only like getting to know them when they join, but the game does this thing in its story where at first you're focused on 2 or 3 characters, which is at the beginning Shion, Cosmos. and I guess Alan. Then after like their whole shtick is done, with them being on the ship and having to withstand a Gnosis attack, and also introducing what an emulator is. Then we get into the story of Momo and Ziggy, and we see who are these characters and what their story in this grand universe is. And then when that plot is done, we get into Junior. And in between, you also get Chaos, which you don't really get much of in this game since he's supposed to be mysterious, like Nephilim. But yeah, and then they join, and then you basically got the whole story, just them going to the same place, and then them hitting into various bumps in the road, and then them encountering this really large threat, and then they stop it, and then it goes to the next game. That's really a bridge version, but yeah, I think the game does a really good job of being an introduction game.
Yeah, like I think what this game does really well is the fact that it doesn't really suffer from kind of like first game in the series syndrome, where the entire thing is nothing but build up for the sequels. Like it feels like everything that happens in this game is actually meaningful and contributes to the actual overarching story, and it doesn't go out of its way to bombard you with like lots of exposition. Like it feels like there's actual progression being made.
I do like how each story arc with each character's introduction is interesting on its own.
Yeah, like it does a great job of showcasing that the characters kind of like background, and shows how they tie into like the bigger overarching plot too. Because like none of the little arcs in the beginning of the game feel like they're filler either. Like they actually feel meaningful to the grander story too, which I think is really well done how they handle it. And you know, even though once you reach the end of the game, like even though obviously there's still a lot of unanswered questions, it still feels like, you know, everything that happened in this first game actually like mattered. Like I said, it didn't feel like it was just an introduction and just build up. Even like it felt like everything was actually meaningful.
Like Xenosaga 1 overall is an incredibly solid foundation for Xenosaga 2 and 3 to build upon.
Like it really, like it gets its hooks in you, and it creates like all the, you know, it creates all these mysteries. And even though the vast majority obviously of your questions aren't answered, it does give you a couple of little breadcrumbs to chew on later on in the game. Like it does give you a couple of minor revelations to ponder, but what's also like these revelations also end up opening up more questions too. But like the game doesn't leave you in the dark for literally everything. Like it lightly explains kind of like what the URTVs are. It explains a couple. There's a couple of things that do come to light, but again, like they're pretty minuscule, and the game really does, you know, open up more questions than answers. But still.
Do you want to talk about each character's story arc individually in the first game, or just overall?
We could do that. I mean, because you know they play a pretty big into the story. So
I guess the first story arc is, well, Cosmos and Xion trying to basically complete Cosmos, and they're on this starship, the Buglunde, and then it gets attacked by the Gnosis. And then you get introduced to a variety of characters, like Xion, like I said, and Cosmos. Alan, where he plays a side character for most of the game. He doesn't really get that important into the third game, and even then, that's only for like the ending half of the game.
He's pretty much just your sidekick the entire time for the most part. Although, I mean, I won't say it now, but he does have a really awesome scene in the third game.
You get to introduce to Virgil, who's where the story frames him to be this really, really unpleasant guy who has like this bigotry against Realians, which are like artificial people.
Humans,
yeah, artificial people. And I think that's most of the major characters in the Buglinde at that point.
I think they had Andrew Cherenkov, I think.
Oh yeah, he got Cherenkov. For the most part.
They also did briefly introduce Margulis too, but he was
I would say like Margos get properly introduced in the next story arc with Mo and Ziggy.
Oh yeah, true. Because I mean we saw him like in one part in the first arc, but like that's true.
I think the game does a really good job of. Oh yeah, and they also kind of introduced Jin.
Kind of, yeah, very lightly, and like you don't even see him in person either. It's just over a hologram.
You hear his voice, but even his voice isn't permanent since they've changed the voice actor in the second and third game.
Actually, fun fact: that first voice actor for that one cutscene was Crispin Freeman.
I think the most memorable part of the story arc is introducing the characters really well, and the Gnosis attack and how they introduced the Gnosis in this game.
Yeah, I think the Gnosis have a really great presence in this game that the other two games actually like really don't have as much.
Yeah.
Like they feel, even though some of the Gnosis designs are a little silly at times, their actual presence is very menacing.
I think the way how they like in 2 and 3, Gnosis attack doesn't seem that big of a deal.
Mm-hmm. I also kind of attribute this to the fact that they planned to have 6 games, but they had to make compromises, so they couldn't develop the whole Gnosis thing as much as they probably planned to.
But the Gnosis attack and how it starts is just really amazing. It's just an amazing cutscene overall, where you see like the starship is just like going through space, and then they get attacked by Gnosis, and like the oh shit button happens, and you just see how terrifying the Gnosis attack is. See how terrifying these like translucent beings are, and how out of luck you are if you don't have like the proper equipment to fight them, but how to phase through, how they can just like kill anybody if they lay a hand on you, how scary it is to see a character getting turned to salt as the Gnosis kills them, and that POV shot where they get attacked and nosified is like really effective, I think. Like this scene and like the first game overall tone, it's just so different from 2 and 3 when you get down to it.
Yeah, like there's this sense of like there's like this kind of cold feeling that the first game that the other two don't have. Like, okay, I do think that 3 is a pretty dark game as well in its own right, but there's this sense of I wish I could find the proper word to describe the first game.
There's like this sense of groundedness to it, I think.
Yeah.
And it does also do a pretty good job of having this atmosphere mystery to it in terms of how when they're talking about the Gnosis, as well as the various plot points they introduce, but it's just dangling in front of us. That's what I think, anyway. Yeah.
The tone is definitely, I think, the most effective in the first game.
Yeah. Like, the overall atmosphere and tone is just, like, a Xenosaga's one best aspect.
Yeah, I think that out of the whole trilogy, that's where Xenosaga 1 shines the brightest compared to the other 3 games.
As for Xion and Cosmos character introductions, I think they do a pretty good job here. Xion's like shown to be this pretty confident and no nonsense type of person who just goes straight to the point. But then you do see her more tender side, I guess, when talking to the Realians.
Yeah, she's very like sensitive and conscientious to their feelings and to their, because like some of the Realians kind of have like sort of like a not existential crisis, but like some of them do have kind of struggle with like identity, I guess. And Xion's very sympathetic to that, so she's a very empathetic character, at least in the first game mostly, and then she does a good job.
Yeah, and you do have a really interesting exchange between Xion and Virgil in the game, which is really where one of the heavy parts of the story arc comes from.
Like especially like when Virgil uses that button to basically have the Realians act as like puppets to like suicide bomb or what I think it was, something like that.
Yeah. And then you have the badass moments where Cosmos activates, and then basically use the Hilbert effect. And then you see what she did is the same thing as Virgil did to the Realians, but to him. And yeah, overall, it's a pretty interesting and exciting introductory story arc for the first game. Is there anything else to add?
I don't think so. I mean, like Xion and Cosmos, they had good introductions. They're definitely like some of the more memorable characters. I also think that like they do a good job of building up Virgil, because even though his appearance in this game is small, they do a good job of like kind of giving you this very negative first impression intentionally of Virgil. But then in the third game, then you start to see more of his character come to light, and then I actually like really start to like his character.
I guess we should talk about Ziggy and Momo. Overall, I think this character arc does a really good job of selling us Ziggy in the game, in terms of being this really old android who wants to basically just destroy his memory so it become full machine, just because he has this painful past that he wants to bury, because that's his way of coping. And then he meets Momo, which is this like very pure and innocent Realian child, which reminds him kind of his own child, which he lost a long time ago. And overall, I do like the interactions, not only in this game but throughout the entire series.
They have a very nice like kind of like father-daughter kind of love relationship going on, and it feels very genuine and sweet.
But yeah, mostly the story arc isn't like too heavy on character writing when Ziggy does get to the meteor base. But like, I think Ziggy's introduction is very interesting.
You also got to like see like snippets of his past with his wife and son, and that was really touching and then sad.
And then you get introduced to Margulis in this part, and he's really, really cool. He's intimidating, but he's pretty cool, especially being like one of the only two people in the entire series that uses a sword.
Yeah, there's like him, Jin, and that's really about
That's basically it. Just back a bit to like to Cosmos and Xion, where they're stranded and they're rescued by Elsa. And then basically, after some shenanigans, and after forcing Cosmos to let the Elsa take in Xion and Alan, they basically meet up with Ziggy and Momo, who are retreating from the people that kidnapped Momo in the first place. Overall, that's a pretty exciting part of the storyline.
Yes, watching those two arcs like converge like relatively early on in the game is pretty cool to see how they end up meeting up.
Then afterwards, we get introduced to Junior, which is you don't really get much of Junior except for his base personality in this part, I think.
Yeah, we learned very little about his backstory. Like it's all saved for the second game. But Junior's still a very like charismatic character. He's pumping with personality. He's definitely one of my favorite characters. I thought he had a really strong
He's just
intro.
like really gung ho kid character, even though he's supposed to be. And he's really fun because of that gung ho characteristic he has.
Yeah, it's like one of the things that makes him so endearing and entertaining, and he's just a really good character. And I like the banter that he has with like his crewmates in the what was the ship called?
The Durandal.
Durandal, that's what it was. Thank God.
And then when they resolve that situation, they go to the Kukai Foundation. I think there's a plot point I'm forgetting.
Yeah, I think they don't they meet Xion and everyone else first, and then then Junior takes them to the Kukai Foundation.
Yeah.
Because I remember they got swallowed up by that giant Gnosis.
They got swallowed up by the Cathedral Gnosis. I think that's what it's called. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
And then during that part, where Like before, you get like snippets of what's his name again?
Cherenkov.
Yeah, Cherenkov, character, and he really is kind of a tragic character in terms of being like he's kind of like Ziggy in a way, in terms of being a human that's like out of his element due to him like having lived in the past and just being thawed out.
Yeah, he's a soldier and he hasn't been able to live amongst regular civilians, and he's
Yeah,
caused like all kinds of crimes because of it. And he had like personality reconfiguration.
and then
Um,
he thought he met someone that like really understood him, but then
mhm,
he found out she only married him just for the benefit that her being married to him would bring,
mhm.
which made him snap and then kill her, which made her go into more personality reconfiguration. And then a lot of stuff happened, which gets him to clash paths with Margulis, where he have this fascination with Margulis just because of how he treated him. And then throughout traveling through the cathedral, Gnosis, you get these cutscenes that do make you feel for him, even though he is a terrorist. Yeah.
Yeah, he's actually like I guess you could probably call him like a ultimately like decent person. Like he's not a bad man. He's not a bad guy. He's just went through a lot of shit and just he couldn't deal with it.
And then he turns to the Gnosis just because he was nosified earlier, and then and the effect just catch up to him. And then you have this really sad scene about Shion asking where he is, even though they did kill him because he did turn to Gnosis. And then they go to the Kukai Foundation, where they relax a bit, and then all shit goes to hell just because there's this group who plans to take the
The heart emulators or something.
the emulators, and you get introduced to the best antagonist in the series, probably Albedo.
Also, but probably the best Crispin Freeman role ever.
It's pretty hard between Albedo and Kotomine.
True. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
a toss up.
As far as the first game is concerned, like Albedo is just this like sadistic embodiment of a man. Like you just see him going crazy in this game, and it's just like so memorable. Especially the way the Momo and Albedo scene. It's just like insane, man.
That's one of like the most memorable parts of the entire trilogy. That one scene alone,
Yeah.
and that solidifies him as one of the most menacing like villains in Xenosaga, all of
Yeah.
Xenosaga.
But yeah, basically once they resolve that, it's basically the end of the game. But then you do get some snippets of Junior's backstory from in that conflict too.
Yeah. They like that was like I mentioned before. Like they lightly reveal kind of some info about the like URTVs and things like that. They give you some little snippets, but they definitely don't give you the full story at all.
Mm-hmm.
But it just goes to show you that there is a connection between the two of them, and also Guinan, that all three of them are connected to each other.
Yeah. But yeah, overall, I think the story is really good considering it's like an introduction story. Like it does.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the best examples of like if we're looking at like a continuous like story like across multiple games, Xenosaga, like the first Xenosaga, is like one of the better examples of how to handle like the first game in the series and keeping it consistently engaging without it making it just nothing but build up.
Yeah.
And it's consistently engrossing, and it, even though it leaves you with a lot of unanswered questions, it still manages to feel like everything that you do, that throughout the course of the game actually has like an impact on the grander scheme of things, and it manages to introduce all of its major characters in a very interesting way, while also kind of keeping certain things in the dark about them, like with Junior or Chaos and things, and you know what I mean. And they also foreshadow other characters too that we see later on, like Kevin Winnicott we didn't mention. We see flashbacks of him, and he ends up becoming like a very major character later on in the trilogy. So, but yeah, overall, I think that the story is handled extremely well in the first game. What do you think, Forrest?
Basically, one is just a basically build up of character introduction, and overall the game has a sense of urgency to try to stop the Gnosis from not only conquering the entire galaxy, but even those flying out in outer space. The biggest takeaway from this game, essentially, though, for anyone who's played it for the first time, it's about you deciding whether or not you want to put the time into the story. Because if you don't find the first game at all interesting, then the other two games will definitely not be, or it won't be worth wasting your time into. Because these games are story driven. So you will encounter at times in the first game it can kind of drown itself out in terms of being kind of slow to pick up pace, because this game is really establishing the actual world of everything, and that's what I liked about the first game, was that on top of the fact it's trying to give you a story that seems like it's more expansive than what it starts out to be, and there's a lot of crazy organizations coming around, like the UTIC organization later on in the stories. Of course, the other places they went to, traveling across these different locations that you get to go to, and just seeing the Gnosis trying to take hold of everything. It's a pretty good story, and it only gets better from the first game. So for me, overall, great game, mystery behind all the characters, and above all else, I think the way the actual cinematic cutscenes really adds to the game. It makes the game feel like you're watching a movie at times, and the voice acting is top notch. It's a really good game. I absolutely like the first Xenosaga game.
I guess we should talk about the other aspects of Xenosaga as well. Leveling, customization, I think it's like the series' best, honestly.
Yeah, there's like actually a few different customization systems in the Xenosaga 1 that whereas 2 and 3 like simplify them quite a bit, whereas Xenosaga 1 has like a different system for ethers, another system for tech attacks, and another system for skills. So there's a good bit amount of customization in Xenosaga 1 that the other I don't think that each system individually is terribly deep, but it does offer a pretty decent sense of progression. And I do appreciate the fact that there's
Like,
just so many different like mechanics to delve into.
Like, I think the best part about the customization is like there are various paths you can build each character to, but they still feel they're really distinctive to each other still. Which is not the case for when you go talk about the customization in Xenosaga 2 and maybe 3 to an extent. Yeah. Leveling system wise, it's pretty standard. You level up, you get stronger, and once you get to a certain level, you learn some skills. So basically, yeah, that's basically the standard leveling system. But I think the customization and how they handle you learning skills and EP stuff is really cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of variety in the customization and a lot of options in how you could build your characters compared to 2 and 3, which are a lot more streamlined. Yeah. The first game has a lot more options.
Yeah. Now, in combat, I will probably say Xenosaga 1 is like the slowest combat. Well, no. Like
It's pretty slow. It's a toss up between 1 and 2 in terms of like the speed at which the combat goes, but like the animations in 1 can really drag
the
out.
overall animation speed is slower than 2, but 2 takes longer just because of what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I'd probably say 1 is a lot of fun due to how you just basically, due to how you can basically build up all these special attacks together, and it's really cinematic and cool to see your characters do these over-the-top attacks. And B, the event tile, which basically gets you to pay attention to how you move, and which give credence to the boost mechanic, which lets you decide when to make an extra turn if you build enough gauge. And it's really, really cool how you basically have to pay attention to the event tile, since they do give various bonuses, and that applies to your enemies as well, which means you do have to pay attention to the turn list. And overall, and
Yeah, I think that mechanically, Xenosaga 1 is probably like probably the best battle
Yeah.
system, just in terms of the sheer
yeah,
depth. Like, even
and
though, like you said
Xenosaga
too,
1 probably has the best implementation of the event tile system in the series, with how it basically you basically have to know how to utilize it in order to beat the bosses. And the bosses
Mhm.
mechanically is designed in a way where you do have to manipulate it to a degree
Mhm.
in order to beat them. Because if not, you're gonna die.
And what's even cool, because when you look at those specific instances, that you also have to take advantage of the boost mechanic, because if you know a certain tile is coming up and the boss is going to go next, you might need to sneak in a boost so that your character can snag that turn.
Like the first boss, like the boss that basically is a gateway to, if you don't learn this, you're not going to pass it. Is the boss is like the mechanical boss that you counter on the Elsa when Shion, Cosmos, Ziggy, and Momo meet for the first time. Because if you do not, like, you have to make sure that the boss don't get like the critical tile ever, or you're gonna die. Like the other games in the series, I don't think the event tile has as much significance as it does in the first game.
Actually, in Xenosaga 3, they didn't even have it at all, which was
Yeah.
really disappointing.
Now, Lisa, this is kind of a jump in I should mention. While these guys have been mentioning a couple of the more kind of poignant things to the first game that you really don't notice in the other two, or they just been removed entirely. The boost mechanic is basically a staple in the trilogy. Every game uses the boost mechanic in some form, but their actual use of the boost mechanic is different per game. And when we get to the second game, we'll discuss the reason why it's different from the first.
Yeah.
You do
But I
follow
do
the
think,
idea of gaining the ability to have an extra turn to utilize the character when you need them to be used, but the way you implement the boost mechanic slightly differs. Uh, the purpose for the boost mechanic, it's more or less just giving you an extra chance to have an extra move. But I think
what?
primarily the first game utilized it better because it makes you strategize how much more damage you're able to accomplish with characters. And above all else, this is something that a lot of that I don't think you guys mentioned before, but those special moves that you can learn in the game, they have these really cool animations behind them. One of them, I think, my favorite is when you have the moon in one of the cutscenes, and you get this really crazy, like almost like a samurai ability. Like some of the animations in the first game, 3 and 2 do not even come close to one. In no in that respect, it's just
Like one's
one.
animation is much more cinematic than 2 and 3 in terms of battle animations.
Hmm.
Well, that's one of the reasons I like the first game's combat more. And again, this also goes back to something important that we probably didn't talk about in the beginning, and that is actually budget wise. I felt the budget in the first game overall was just better because you can see it in the way the animations are, the way the cutscenes are, and the way the characters look more anime-ish in the first game. I think they had some idea of what they were going for in terms of style, substance, and quality of what the series was to be expected of. And they had more time to flesh out the story in a way that kept you suspenseful the whole way through. And even in the combat, it feels the same way. The combat feels like an evolution. Like it has the groundwork to build something better. But I think as we'll mention with the second game, you'll start to see why we feel that this wasn't quite the way we had hoped the series was going to go. But for myself, I never disliked the combat in one. There were times, however, where when you're grinding, because of just how slow the game is, just running around different areas, trying to grind, trying to level up your characters. I do feel the game is very slow in that regard. It just feels like it's forever to just build any sort of ability to like level up your characters because the game gets pretty hard towards the end. It's not the game kind of has difficulty spikes at some points where you just don't expect these some notes to be extremely hard or some bosses to be extremely hard. So you end up in a point where you just have to grind. And so with it kind of feeling slow in some
Yeah,
regard,
I wouldn't say
it
you
just
need to grind in Xenosaga 1 per se. You just need to know how to use
personally
the
for
boost
me,
mechanic and
personally
invite
for
tile
me,
mechanic to its best in the game.
personally for me, I think you have to grind. That's just what I think. Because if you have not done a decent enough job to establish your equipment and your characters and the way they are used in combat, if you don't get used to them, if you don't know what specific your type of abilities you want to use, and the way you combine your attacks, because you can fling characters up in the air and you can tack them down on the ground. There's strategy to how you fight. If you don't really understand the basic combat, you will feel like you're not really grasping it, and you will get behind and you will lose a lot. But at the same time, however, the game isn't hard. It just makes you think of what to do next. It's all important because you just can't just pick any attack and think it's going to work. You have to actually think and utilize each character differently because everybody plays differently and brings something to the table that, say, Shion can do that Cosmos can't, vice versa. Ziggy can, and Momo can. So it just depends on who you're using. Junior's the same way. So it all just depends on what the right moment asks for when those things happen. And let's not forget, in combat, you ride those mechs too. There are times in the game where you have to use them, and while they're not always used, you don't always use them in combat. When it does happen, it adds a different flair of substance to the game. I feel like it took a back seat in this game though, because they're not utilized as often as
Yeah, I think
say.
they're pretty useless in the first game, honestly.
Yeah, but without them, however, we wouldn't
I
have the
mean,
series.
to this game's credit, this is probably the most free flowing combat system regarding them, just because you have the choice to use them in regular combat. Why in 2 and 3 you're like they basically block off any attempts to use eggs, or like what they're called in the ESs, what they're called
Yes.
in since they
Let, let's let,
switch
let's
from
let's
eggs to
let's
ESs in 2 and 3, where you have
let's be
basically just
honest.
entire sections just revolving
Let's
around those.
let's be honest here. There is no way in the world you can summon a ES inside of an airship, especially in some of the rooms are so small.
Yeah, yes,
Like
as they can.
like the really
They
well
basically have these
well.
portable devices for them.
No, hold on,
Mhm.
hold on. It makes no sense. Is what I'm saying.
It makes sense
So
considering the overall world building the game has built up to.
yeah, but I mean, if you really think about it, it don't make sense. There's just no way in some areas of the game you can summon an ES. It's just like realistically, it's not feasible. When you're walking around a small hallway and all of a sudden you go into combat, whoa! Look at this huge area.
Have you
Like,
seen how big the hallways are in the games when you
have you
do go
seen
fight in
how
them?
small the hallways are in the games, Peter?
Yeah, right. I played it through the game
Exactly.
recently, man.
I'm just no. Not every hallway is huge, but then you walk down a narrow corridor and then you go into combat and then there's this huge opening.
Let's
I
just
could have.
let's just chalk it up to RPG logic. How about
I'm
that?
just saying. I'm just saying. I don't think the first game makes sense when it comes to summoning the ES. That's one of the reasons I don't particularly care for the ES in the first game because it just logically makes no sense to me that you can just summon them anytime. It don't make sense. That's why I think the second and third games does it better.
Like,
But
like, I'm not a fan of the ESs in the second and third games, but just because of how simplified they are.
that's why I like them.
I didn't mind it so much in 3 only because you had more customization options with the ESs because you actually like they had their own set of equipment and abilities, whereas in 2 it's very very basic.
Like
Um,
3 does a good job building upon the ES mechanics, just because of how they use the anima system in that game.
This is one of the reasons why I think we should really talk about the combat of all three at once. And because the reason I say that, while we could go into detail in each one, It makes it easier to let people understand the evolution of the series. All three of these games are
I wouldn't
turn
really say
based.
it's an evolution.
It kind of is. Now, evolution is not the actual main term that I want to call it evolution. It's more of where the series evolved and got better, and where did the series fall back. I think we can all agree. Two was the one they tried something completely different, and whether it worked or not is another matter. And three is the game that appeals to everybody. It's the one
I
that's like
mean,
the most straightforward combat system. It's fast paced. It gets to the point. It's super fast in battle and super fast back into the field, right? We can all agree to that. It has the
it's
best
also
load times of any in the series.
it's also
And
incredibly easy.
well, here's the thing: it's easy, but is the game fun? I think we all can agree that the combat is fun. It's fun because it's flashy. It kind of gives me an early vibe of Persona, just how quick, smooth, and just gets to the point. And I
Yeah,
think
but
the reason they
Persona's still
went that route,
difficult.
difficulty is the eye of the beholder.
Okay. So, do
What
you think
matters is
Xenosaga
what
3 is the
matters is
easiest game?
Wait. Say this again. What's your
Do you
question?
think Xenosaga 3, combat system wise, just overall combat, is the easiest in the series?
Um, I think
I don't know about that.
I think two is the easiest difficulty wise, but three is not. Three is pretty easy too.
Now here's the thing about easy. See, easy in what way are we talking? Is every part of the game easy from start to finish? Is that what you're saying? Is every boss
Honestly,
easy?
in
No,
terms of Xenosaga,
I found some bosses in the third game to be very challenging.
I
I
actually
found
I only thought one boss was hard in three, to be honest with you. Margulis, I thought he was pretty tough,
yeah,
but
Margulis
otherwise,
was. But what I'm saying though, was the game fun? Did I ever think as I was playing the combat in the third game, oh my god, I'm bored? I never once ever thought about that. Did I ever
it's a
think
fun game to play. No, it's not so easy
what,
that it's like putting me to sleep.
what I'm saying though is if you think about it, when you play its combat, right? Did it ever cross your mind at any point in time? Did you think, wow, this game is too easy?
I
It
did.
never crossed my mind. And
I did at some points.
again, when I initially played the game for the first time, it never crossed my mind. You know what game did cross my mind to be difficult? Was actually the second game. And the reason I say that is when you beat the first game, you bring over any of your
Like,
previous content
talking about the second game
to the
difficulty is
second game.
kind of tricky. Just because it's a
Well,
lot of trial and error with how
hold on,
combat
let me
is.
finish what
Yeah,
I was trying to say.
it has some challenge, but not for the right reasons.
Hold on, let me finish what I was trying to say. The second game does not have stores. So you whatever you have prior to the ending of the first game, you carry over that. Outside of maybe a few times you find a few revives and a couple of healing items, the second game, for all intents and purposes, is challenging because a lot of the things that it brought to the first game, they took away from the series. And the way that the combat worked in the second game was you having to fight every enemy and boss a certain way exactly, and you couldn't veer one way to the right or to the left. It had to be a certain way combined with another character to create a certain combo that does most damage. That's why, while 2 isn't necessarily hard, it's in itself, it's hard if you don't know what you're doing. Does that make sense? So while 3 is easy in terms of its more streamlined combat, 2 expects you to understand how to fight the Gnosis a certain way, how to fight certain enemies that are not Gnosis, humans, or whatever they are, mechs, whatever the case is. If you don't know the certain strategy to fight them, the game will be hard until you understand the combos that you have to do the most damage. Because there was a boss fight in the second game that you could only fight them a certain way that would defeat them. As crazy as as much as I try to repeat myself fighting it, there's a cutscene where you in the snowy like countryside, and a person transform into that monster. That fight was hard because it was one of the first bosses actually remember playing in that second game. Where I was like, wow, this is really difficult. That's the only game I thought in the series or in the trilogy that I actually thought the game was challenging was two. One was challenging because as the game progressed, the whole idea, the further you go into the game, the harder the bosses get, the more the tougher the enemies get, the more you have to grind, the more you have to level up, the more you have to learn. The
What?
Xenosaga One follows a set strategy like most JRPGs follow, where you just
I would say like Xenosaga's one bosses were the most unique in the series, just because of how it implements the each boss to interact with the event tiles and boost gauge.
right. However, at the same time, as we need to emphasize, the budgets fell on these games as time went on. So when you can try to compare one, two, and three, you really cannot because of the way these games were made. The third game was the least budgeted, even though third game looks better than two. The third game
The
was
third game looks better too, just because it went back to the art style that made one work.
I know, but the three looks better, arguably. There's no doubt about it. But what I'm saying though is the budgets were shifted. The budgets just you can definitely tell one had more time to cook in the oven. It had more time to establish a great battle system, a great set of characters, introducing them, and a great sort of art style. But I just have to be honest. They are all turn-based JRPGs. They all have a boost gauge. What separates the three? I look at Xenosaga 3 essentially this, guys, is 3 is a streamlined turn-based JRPG. Streamlined that everyone can enjoy it and have a great time with it. You occasionally use your mechs to solve puzzles within some of the dungeon areas, which I don't like them, sadly. And some of the boss fights I felt was interesting because when you get those really cool moments in the story that gives you like, when a sword, what I'm talking about, when the story picks up in the third game, when he starts getting real crazy, right? That's when you see these really cool boss fights come up towards like the midway through the game and towards like the end of the game where it really gets good. I actually found the game to be just kind of fast paced, back to back fights. You're progressing the story, you're moving along, the story's just picking up speed, and I was having a great time with that game. And its combat it's just sort of you in battle, out of battle, you're moving, you're in battle, you're out of battle. It's like the sense of speed that I got from the
I
third
will
game.
say like Xenosaga's three greatest strength is its speed.
Yeah, the story never slows down. That's the thing. When you combine the
like
combat,
in terms of the combat system.
well, it combining with the fact of how the story actually flows in that game, the combat keeps that pace of the story too. Not just because the combat's fast, but because everything about how the game plays is fast. So you get what I'm saying? Compare it to one. Doesn't you notice that the combat is sort of slow and sort of the animations are sort of like long-winded when they're doing things? Like you ever see how Shion is powering up that weapon and it takes her a minute to use it and she shoots the
Yeah,
know.
but it looks awesome.
But what I'm saying, however, is that you got to compare how the game is designed. Even in the first game, the way the story moves in this sort of a movie-like atmosphere, the way the combat kind of goes in this kind of slow pace, sort of archaic feel, is because of how the game overall is made. That's what I like about the aesthetic of 1, 2, and 3. They all follow the same idea. And 3 follows the idea of this fast-paced combat. Whether it's the story and the combat itself, it's all fast to the point. You in there, wham, bam, boom, and then you right back into the story. That's what I liked about the third game.
I will say, like, why I do like the third game, I think it's a lot of fun. I do wish it still kept some of the complexities of 1 or even 2, because like it's a really streamlined game. It's like Yakuza. It's like Yakuza Like a Dragon in some ways. in terms of how
Yeah,
streamlined
it's
it is.
very basic. Like I mean, like people, we can rag on 2's combat system all we want and say that's convoluted and this, that, the other thing. But the fact of the matter is that 3 is kind of like a little too far in the opposite direction,
Yeah.
where it's like mind-numbingly simple. Not that it's not fun. It still is. It's an entertaining combat system. But like in 1 and 2, you can kind of create like these elaborate combos with your different characters. And then in 3, it just goes back to a very like streamlined menu-based combat system, like in a Final Fantasy game or something.
Like the most you're doing is like getting an enemy to break gauge, and then you just take advantage of that.
And you just wail on them until they die.
And like even
I think-
even the boost gauge isn't really used for boost anymore in that game. It's just
Actually, that's another thing that I found kind of peculiar. And out of all the different like reviews and stuff I've seen of Xenosaga 3, that's the one thing that no one's ever brought up, is the fact that I don't like how the special attacks in 3 are tied to the boost gauge.
Yeah, you basically just use boost
This
gauge
is
for
one of the
special
main
attacks.
reasons, guys, why I mentioned that comparing 3 at once is a good idea, comparing all 3 battle systems, because this is why you find the weaknesses of each one, discussing them all at once. That's one of the reasons I say the boost gauge is the one thing that got rolled over into all 3 games, but they're implemented differently. They're not done. They're not the way the first game worked. More about strategy. You utilize the boost gauge to give you an extra chance to strategize when you're stuck in a situation you need them the most. Third game doesn't really necessarily need the boost gauge for that reason. It's like Swore mentioned. It's specifically for a purpose. Whereas the second game sort of follows the idea of the first game strategy of the boost gauge, but the thing is, it's building upon a combo. You need that character maybe for a specific reason. Like if say what's his name, Junior throws up a character in the air, right? You need someone to bring that character down to the ground to do major damage. Shion can't do that, so someone else needs to take the role of that. That's one of the things I liked about the second game. That's one of the reasons I like the second game. Now, these guys here don't like the second game as much. I personally like the second game because I found the music, the atmosphere, and the story. To the combat's credit, it's not. Once you understand it, is the weakest combat system out of 3. Bar none, it's not the best one. But just the idea of learning how to grasp the characters and how to use them. It's one of the reasons I highly recommend, if you're going to play the second game, you need a strategy guide. Strategy guide will allow you to sort of understand how to combine the attacks to get the best damage in each battle.
Overall, in terms of combat system, I'd probably say I like 1 and 3 around the same, and then 2.
There's no doubt in my mind that 1 and 3 are even to me. 3 because of just how fast paced it is. Yes, it's streamlined. Yes, it's not. It's not what the 1 is. On a good day, I'd rather play 1. On a bad day, I'd rather play 2. Not that I don't dislike 2, but in theory, 2 would be the game I'd go to last if I just if I'm like, all right, you're trying to play the games in order. You just have to breeze. You really can't breeze through 2 because it's really not that easy to breeze through. But yeah, the 2 is the weakest. I personally like 2 for different reasons, combat wise, but yeah, I agree. 1 and 3 are equal. And Sword, where are you? Do you think 1 and 3 is equal, or do you think 3 more than 1? Or
They're pretty close, but I think that mechanically 1 wins out combat wise. But 3's not that far behind it, I think. That's where I stand.
How about 2? What do you think of 2?
It could not be down on the at the bottom of the barrel further. It's like it's so weird because I really respect the ideas of the combat in 2. And hell, honestly, there was even times where I actually was having kind of fun with it at times, especially once in the beginning when I started to get kind of finally learn the ropes. But first of all, I think we mentioned it before, but it's very trial and error. There's a lot of guesswork, and it's a lot of just memory that relies on. It's also kind of a test of patience because, like, enemies just refuse to go down. Like they're such big damage sponges, and battles will take like
Like
5 minutes a piece.
like the main culprit of its slowness is just how you have to build up boost to its maximum.
Yeah,
So, like,
that
your
doesn't
focus-
help either. Like if you're not doing that, forget about it. It's never gonna be over.
That's the thing about the second game. Boost is important. Whereas in the first game, you could get through battle without technically using
You
it.
can't get through the boss battles without using boost well.
Well, the reason you need the boost battle or the boost gauge is quite simple, and I mentioned this before. You have to combine your other characters to do major damage. And here's the thing: even if you build a boost gauge, if you do not know what you're doing in terms of no understanding the weaknesses, how to specifically attack an enemy in a certain order, you will fail. It doesn't matter about how many times you boost a character. If you do not understand the combat in this system, overall mechanics of 2, you will fail every time. This is just being honest. Because 2 works on you learning the weaknesses in a certain way of fighting an enemy. And that's one of the reasons I think 2 is sort of the weakest game out of the series. Because once you learn how to attack an enemy, it's the same for every enemy thereafter. There's no difference. It's not like every enemy can have a different way of attacking them. You know what I mean? Like when you play, what's a good example? Like, you know how you have free flowing ideas in certain JRPGs where, as long as you meet the same end when you fight an enemy, the game gives you sort of an open idea of how you want to maybe level up a character or do a certain way. To some extent, the game allows you to have flexibility in the way a character fights in combat. It may take you a little more. What I'm trying to say
It gives you
is
flexibility in terms of choosing what team you want. But
most times in 2 you didn't have that
most
luxury.
characters are like basically the same in Xenosaga 2.
Well, that's because most times you're using the same character,
I
or if you're
mean, like,
alternating, they're using the same idea of weaknesses.
what I mean
Like
by that is that you're always going to have either Xion or Momo, just because they're the archer type of enemy, of the characters you want to use, because they do a lot of damage. And then you have like Junior or Chaos, who can launch enemies, and Jin or
What, Cosmos?
Ziggy, that can basically push them down.
Like the only thing that differentiates the characters in 2 is just their like attack zones.
Yeah.
Really, like other than that, they're exactly the
Like
same.
the attack zone thing is mostly between like Xion and Momo, because they're the only one who can hit like one attack zone that the others can't.
Zone A, I think,
All
or
right.
something.
Here's a basic understanding of it. So you have 3 zones: it's C, B, or A. So A is your air attack. That's usually Xion, Momo, Cosmos, and Jin. They usually can do these air attacks. Usually, like, hold on.
Jin shares like the other characters' combat zone. Like
No,
the combat
let me-
zone that's like the differentiated is basically just like the long range characters, which is like Xion and Momo.
Okay, hold on. So now there is also what is called damage down. So when you have an enemy in the air, when you damage down a character, it does 2 times stronger damage than normal. Not every character works in this regard, however. Combined, certain strategies may require you to go CBCC. So you may have to combine CB with one character, boost another character, do CC, and maybe you have to do 1A at the end. And unfortunately, when you learn each character has either CBA or AACC or CBAAC, you boost another character, do CBCC damage. This is one of the reasons why 2 is so weird in its design, because the first and the third game don't do this. They don't utilize these so weird like attack zones. And then the other problem with this game is if you don't have a strategy guide, you'll be sitting forever trying to understand this. Now, another thing about this game is it's ES battles. The game also has ES battles in 2. I'm not exactly sure if I ever disliked the ES battles in 2. I think I liked them. I
think
thought they were
2 is
okay.
like the
I
most
didn't I didn't like them at all. I
the
thought they
ES
were
battles
terribly
in
boring. I thought
Xenosaga 2 is like the most simplistic combat
they're
system ever.
it's even more simple than Xenosaga 3's combat system. Like they're so boring. You got like every character is like two moves and that's it.
Mm.
Xenosaga 3 I think really refined the ES battles a lot, and I think they made them a lot more enjoyable.
Like they made it a lot more enjoyable just because you have much more weapons to choose from. Because there's an actual shop system in the Xenosaga 3, as well as how it implement anima, which is this like overdrive system.
Basically, 2 is the black sheep. If you can't get through 2, then I don't blame you if you give up on it, because it's one of those games you're either gonna like it or you're not gonna like it.
I think we should wrap up on talking about the combat system of 2, 1, 3. Like 1, 3 are pretty fun. Like they're not the best combat system ever, but they're still really fun. 2 is a mixed bag.
Still like 2 though. I don't care what nobody says.
It's got the combat definitely has a very solid foundation, very good, very interesting ideas, and it actually can be enjoyable at times. Like making all these very long combos and teaming up your characters with boosts can be pretty satisfying, but the whole process of it is just so time consuming and convoluted, and even though sometimes it can be satisfying to pull off very long combos with your characters, it doesn't make up for the jank of it all, and doesn't make it any less trial and error, especially when you're fighting like a new enemy, and you're just kind of just guessing and memorizing which zones work and which ones don't. So
Yep.
it's got a lot of problems, and I think that while it has some good ideas on paper, it really boils down to bad execution.
And combine that with the fact you have no stores to buy items, makes the game that much more harder.
I guess we should talk about the story in 2 and 3, since we were talking combat system of 2. Xenosaga 2 story, it mostly revolves around Albedo and Sakura, kind of.
And also and Guinan to a lesser extent.
But then they do try to tie up the threads of Momo and her mother relationship, as well as Ziggy, with them hinting of how like Junior's asking him to get upgrade that expand his life expectancy. Because like now that he has like Momo, someone he cares about,
he started to like kind of feels like more of a will to live again. He started to like regain that sense
and there's
of
a
life.
really good scene.
Well, not just to mention, he
between
feels like he has a
Ziggy.
purpose to take care of somebody, because in the story in the first, he had a family, he lost everything. So, I think though the story in 2 really falls around Junior.
I think too, but I do think it does a really good job of tying up the relationship between Momo and her mom. And I think there's this really good scene between Ziggy and Momo's mother, and then Ziggy's trying to convince to treat Momo as her own person. And
instead
that
of
too.
looking at her as
Beyond
like looking at her as a replacement for Sakura.
Death.
Well, to be fair though, too, I think primarily though, while it's a good scene, it gets overshadowed by the fact there's so much story just about Albedo and Junior. The sickening behavior of Albedo. Oh my god.
But yeah, I think the second game does a really great job of expanding about on Albedo, about how he became this crazed lunatic, and
he didn't start out that way. He did not start out that
condition.
way. Yeah, he's a lot more. He's way more sympathetic than he was initially, perceived to be in the.
And
first
the reason why he ended up that way is because he realized that it was a blessing and a curse to be able to just take limbs off your body and just revive like no things happened. First, he thought he was a freak. He really was like, wait a minute.
It's more that he is immortal.
And he realized that
Yeah.
He's
No.
realized that his immortality comes at the price of him not being able to live with Junior or Gundam
Guinan.
Guinan.
Hmm.
But I also like the fact of how close they were together. In the
Yeah.
beginning, they were pals. They
Mhm.
they were best friends. It
Yeah.
was like you really couldn't separate them. And it's sort of just in a sickening way when you see him just change behavior. It's like whoa. That's why I like two so much.
Yeah.
Is just because of how twisted Albedo is. How Junior really, on one hand, he knows he does everything in his power to stop Albedo, but at the same time, they grew up together. It's sort of like he cares about Albedo, but he knows he has to stop him. It's like where do you draw the line at with someone who you knew and you understand what they're going through, because like Junior understands where Albedo is. He understands why he is the way he is, but it's trying to save Albedo is the problem, and it's just like you're just like, what can you do? There's no saving Albedo because Albedo's just gone off the rails. Like, it's emotion to me.
Yeah.
I found two story to be emotional
Yeah.
more than anything, and
Like the story
Yeah,
around Junior and Albedo is probably two strongest points in the story. It's really a great and emotive story.
like I think two's story feels almost more character driven compared
Yeah.
to 1 and 3. Not not that that's a bad thing. And plus, the other thing too is like 2 does introduce key plot points for the third game too. Like introduces like a new faction. It introduces a couple of new
It
antagonists.
basically let us find Milsha.
Mm-hmm.
and here's the other thing we talked about before. You can definitely tell the story into is what they wanted for all the 6 games, to establish this individual set of stories for specific characters to sort of open up
Yeah.
more to their specific closure. And I
Uh,
feel like we never got to see that for the relationship between Shion and her brother. That never really got a full establishment. And then when we get to the third game, Alan, who likes Shion a lot, you don't really get to see the actual build up to that. And then, of course, Chaos and the other characters. When we get to the third game, we'll discuss why I'm saying that now. But that's one of the reasons I like two. Two is the what if the series went with the other 4 games, if they had more time to flesh out the stories.
let me before we move on to 3. Moving from 1 and 2, it's really apparent the tonal shift. It's really apparent.
Not just the tone of shift, the freaking art direction. Look at Shion's
Yeah.
face. It
I
looks
mean,
horrible.
It doesn't even look like Shion. Like
I know.
if you put them side by side, I would never think that it was
I mean-
the same
I mean-
character.
Like, you know how we said that Xenosaga 1 felt grounded?
Mhm.
In like, it's like, even though it's a science fiction story that has space magic as well. Xenosaga 2 basically threw all that away. All that groundedness
Screw
feeling to it.
that.
And it's...
Two feels like trying to be realistic.
What?
And it two feels like they're trying to go more of a human realistic look, like more of a
Yeah, for the character models, not for the story tone.
No, the story tone that game is just all over the place.
Like, look at the introduction. You have like basically you have a Gundam fight like with one of the more over the top Gundam shows.
Yeah, that's true. And of course, you start out with not even the main character.
It's like
You start out with Chaos and some other guy
it's like
that you never
going
met
from
before.
I guess it's like going through a typical Gundam show from Xenosaga 1 to going to G Gundam in Xenosaga 2 in terms of tonal whiplash. Tell me I'm wrong in that. You guys know what the Gundam G is, right?
I've honestly never seen any of the
Oh.
Gundam anime.
No, I've only seen a few episodes. I haven't really watched
Yeah.
it.
But yeah, like Xenosaga 2 is just like over the top. anime
Come on
action.
now, you didn't like
Especially-
chopping off of the arms.
It's especially with Jin and
Jin and
Margulis.
Margulis. Like I
That's
like
what
it, I like it, but it is really apparent the tonal shift when you're going from Xenosaga
Yeah.
1 to 2.
Hey, that's the whole point of it. It's psychological. It grinds your gears. It makes you think.
But yeah. As over the top as some things can be, it still actually is a really great story though. Overall, like it's still
It really is.
it answers a lot of your questions while presenting more.
Like it mostly answers the questions between Albedo and Junior, and it resolves like various relationship threads between like Momo,
If only
Ziggy,
if
and
only
her mother.
if only Shion's face could have been improved.
You got improved in 3.
Got hugely improved in 3. Matter of fact, everybody got improved in 3.
I guess we should talk about 3 now. So it's
Yeah.
like, for the most part, there's not much story arcs in Xenosaga 2.
No,
It's
no, it
basically,
really wasn't. No,
It's basically just them trying to figure out how to use this key that's in Momo to get to old Milsha. Them diving to Momo. It's a trap by Albedo, and they have to confront him, and then you get a ton of backstory and character building between Albedo and Junior. And then they find Milsha, and then Albedo tries. They fight a space pope of the Utic organization, because of course it's a space pope. And then he gets betrayed by the Testament, which is this like shady organization that you don't know much of.
Yeah, they're basically like Wilhelm's like henchmen.
Yeah, you don't know. Yeah, you do know Wilhelm's behind the Testament at that point.
Yeah. They're seen like
Yeah.
talking with him. So
Yeah. And then Albedo transcends and tries to basically rewrite the universe, which Junior stopped him. And they have this really emotional conclusion, and that's basically the second game.
and overall,
I mean,
I think that's overall to me is a good story,
Yeah.
start to finish.
So on to the third game, and this is where you can tell that they cram 4 games type of stories into one.
Yes, indeedy.
Like I like,
yeah, like you could tell certain things where they had to kind of cut corners. Unfortunately,
yeah, like Xenosaga 3. I like the story overall, but you can tell just how rushed it is at times, especially in terms of how they resolve each Testament's character arcs.
like I think one of the biggest giveaways of kind of like I guess the rush nature is the fact that there's a full year time skip between 2 and 3,
Yeah.
and there's like a whole other story that happens during that time, and then you only know about it through a data log.
Yeah, like there's just like this
And-
terrorist attack that happens off screen.
Like I
think-
feel like that whole scenario was planned to be actually Xenosaga 3.
Yeah, but it's
Wait,
really
which section?
like this is like Xion is out of vector because of this terrorist attack that happens.
Well, the
And
whole
there's
part
some guy
about
named Grimoire Verum or something like that.
Yeah.
and-
did you guys know that
it's like really confusing when you.
did
go
you guys
for
know
3.
that Alan was supposed to be a playable character in the 5th part of the game? Do you know that part where you control Alan when you actually is playable? He's supposed to have been playable in part 5 of the series.
No, that's interesting.
That's pretty cool.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
So you
overall,
kind of understand where I was reading that the Telos and Cosmos fight, that's supposed to have been the 6th part of the game.
but yeah, most of the story in 3 at the beginning is just figuring out what Vector really is, since it seems to have ties to Grimoire. What was the name again?
I think it was like Grimoire Verum or something like that.
Yeah, Grimoire Variant is what the name.
Yeah. And then you go through a rather interesting story throughout 3 in terms of their pursuit of finding out the truth about what Vector really is, and about Wilhelm, and then Shion's boyfriend, what's his name again?
Kevin Winnicott.
Yeah, then he gets much more prominent role in this game. And
This is the part where they go back to old Milsha for a
Yeah.
time.
hmm
That was interesting too.
You got to see like kind of what led to the Milshan conflict, and you got to see You got to learn a lot of interesting backstory during that arc.
And then you get introduced to Telos in this game, which is basically enhanced version of Cosmos, kind of, but on the bad guy side.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's that also. Well, there's that. Let's not forget, Chaos finally gets his time to shine in the game. He was mysterious through the whole course of the game until you get to the third game. You finally find out some pretty crazy shit about Chaos, and that blew my mind.
I would say, like, in Xenosaga 3, the religious theme is really prominent here. In Xenosaga.
Yes,
it's a lot more. It's a way more heavy-handed in this one.
Like,
yes,
you see Jesus in the.
You see
Mary Magdalene.
Yes. Do you understand how insane that is? When you look at the first game, you're like, what?
And Mary Magdalene is a character in the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it
Just
got
try
really
to figure that one out.
It got a little much for me at the end.
Hey, it was good though, right? It was good.
Could have dealt without.
Nah, it is necessary. Look at Xenogears. I'm just saying. If Xenogears didn't teach you anything, Sword,
I haven't really played enough of Xenogears to really.
Oh my god!
I can't get into it. I tried. I tried playing it like 6 times. I can't get into Xenogears.
Let me ask you. Let me ask you guys something. What do you think of Shion's character, especially in when she's interacting with Kevin?
I don't follow what you mean. I don't follow. What do you?
Shion is a character that I have like some days I love and sometimes I hate.
Oh, you mean how she goes back and forth?
I would probably say Shion's like the most aggressive in this game, to the point where she's sometimes a bitch.
Yeah, sometimes she's hard to like.
Well, that's what makes Shion. She was like that in the first game. I don't know how
she wasn't anywhere near as bad.
She's not like you can still see her.
Hold on. You said not near. Hold on. You didn't say she wasn't. You said not near as bad, which indicates she was.
You can still see her more caring side in 1 and 2.
Well, you gotta realize, guys, that it's the developers can make a character more crazy. They can evolve them. People can actually mature. Because you gotta understand, when Shion first went to Vector, she was all this new upcoming, creating Cosmos, and she was all more innocent, and there was less crazy shit happening than compared to the third game. I mean, at some point you gotta grow up, and you gotta be more all over the place. And Shion was just
she's point, like in 3, she's like so unstable. Yeah. Like she's like a loose cannon.
Well, you gotta understand, dude. There's a lot of crap going on. I mean, you're trying to save the universe, for God's sake.
She doesn't even know. She doesn't even know that yet, though.
No, no, that's not true. That's not true. She knows it from the beginning. Now, she may not know that indirectly she's saving the universe, but in the first game, she knows.
Yeah, she knows there's like Vector has like some sort of connection with the UMA.
Exactly. And that's when shit gets real. Then he realizes, hey, I gotta go insanity mode. So I mean, I get it. Is Shion always a lovable character? Is he the character that everyone thinks of when you first think Xenosaga? No, it's always Cosmos, Telos, and then down the list from there. But the point is, you have to accept the fact that Shion is Shion. And that's why Alan can never win with Shion. No matter how many times he tries to show it that he likes her, she just throws him under the bus.
He wins in this game. He wins in this game.
Alan is way too good for her.
Yeah, that's
Alan
true.
is way better than Shion.
Alan will literally grab at her feet and she still wouldn't recognize him.
Kevin in this game is just a piece of shit.
Yeah,
he's just such a fucking asshole.
Come on now, you gotta admit, Kevin brings his own craziness to the game, though. I mean, let's be
But
real.
I think that was also
he's like a manipulative bastard in this game.
Yeah.
How he
What do
manipulates
you
Shion.
mean? What do you mean?
he's a complete asshole.
Well,
Yeah.
Kevin just wants Shion. That's all.
I like how the game. I like the
That's
game.
the only reason.
I like how the game tried to justify him with a heroic sacrifice, but he doesn't deserve.
No,
No,
but I'm
he was
just
that.
saying.
They didn't redeem him at all. I don't
Yeah.
think they didn't redeem shit. He was an asshole. I'm glad he's dead.
Yeah.
Hold on, but here's the
Fuck him.
thing. Here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. He just wanted Shion.
I can tell the game's trying to get us to sympathize with Kevin a bit, just because of his relationship with Xian. But you're showing how much of an asshole he is throughout the game. Like when you go to the quote unquote past, he's a total asshole when he's younger.
Yeah, but
And then when you get to the present day, he's just manipulating Xian to suit his purposes.
again,
Even though he does love Xian in his own way, he's still manipulating her to turn against her friends and stuff.
exactly. But
And
guess what?
thinking
Doesn't
he's the
work.
only one that can save her.
What? Guess what? Doesn't work.
But is it really saving her when he's just basically going to destroy the universe to reset it?
Yeah, so like this whole shtick doesn't work because he's just trying to reset the universe from the start anyway.
It's like
Yep.
it's like in like Tales of Zillia 2 with Victor, but but that's done like Victor as a character is done much more better than Kevin.
Yeah. Well, here's another thing I was gonna say. Jin actually matures, and Shion forgives him because their relationship was rocky to the
That's the
point
thing
where.
about Shion that pissed me off though was that her reasons for being associated to Jin weren't justified.
Yeah.
Well, at first she didn't know the reason. Like, remember that phone call they had in the first game? You only hear Jin once when he calls her, and she just sort of hangs up on him. You get the impression like he must have did something. They must not have got along. Like, you get the idea it was Jin who was the one that was the bad person, right? But then as you realize as the story goes on, you're like, wait a minute. I think Jin is trying to be. He's trying to understand what the relationship is, like the flaws in the relationship, and she's not accepting it. So she ends up being the one that's the problem. So I do like the fact that Jin does his best, and she eventually respects her brother, but at the same time, it's like it's too late. That's what I love about 3. 3 just had all this crazy stuff happening at one time. It was all over the place. However, do y'all feel like any other characters matured in the game or got worse personality-wise besides Shion, besides Alan,
I didn't think so.
besides?
No, Alan got better, I thought.
I didn't get worse. What are you talking about?
Alan did get worse.
How do you get
How
worse?
so?
You have to play him as a character in the battle. That's why.
So that's not worse than
So
the
what?
character.
To me, that's worse. You should have stayed on the sidelines.
I mean, if you, in a story perspective, I thought it was kind of cool because like the fact that he's temporarily a battle party member shows that he's kind of like grown up and he's ready to, take the conflict head on instead of just like having everyone else do it for him.
That's only because he likes Shion. That's the only reason. All right. So, overall, what do you think the story regarding Telos? What do y'all think about Telos? Because Telos was introduced in this game. What do y'all think about
Telos
her?
is more like a boss character in the story, really.
She's more like a rival kind of character.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she's badass though. Let's not lie.
Cosmos does develop a lot in terms of actually.
Dude, that epic fight between Telos and Cosmos.
Yeah.
Oh my god, dude.
I think
in them
Cosmos,
cutscenes.
Yeah. I think Cosmos does develop a lot in this game, which does make her.
She does. She develops more
She
personality.
has a good arc in this game.
So she actually has a personality now. She's sort of like, oh my god, I can think for myself.
And you know what was the best part with Cosmos in the game?
What?
When she disobeyed Kevin, is like, I'm sorry, I'm rebuilt. I was built by Shion and Alan. Bitch.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys noticed, but if you guys look up Telos versus Cosmos fight, it has almost 1 million views on YouTube. That's just how epic that fight is. That just shows you why that fight between Telos and Cosmos is so renowned. Like that speaks why people love that game. Just be frank. When you have like a freaking 20-minute cutscene of Talos and Kozma fighting. What does that tell you? Oh man, it never fails. It never fails.
People like two hot androids fighting against each other.
I would
What
I
a
would
shock.
assume. Hold on, let's not forget Ziggy was fighting Cosmos in that fight with Telos. He got his ass kicked, but still he tried. Oh man. And this is the reason why we're talking about these games, guys, because at the
But
end
like
of the
overall, the
day,
story,
freaking amazing.
I do think it's a pretty good story. It got like some rather interesting themes of nihilism and what to do. How one like Wilhelm thinks it's better just to reset rather than just continue on to doom because he thinks like the universe is just going to end like no matter what we do.
Yeah,
So
he thinks that humans are like self-destructive and that they're eventually going to destroy themselves.
yeah, why like Shion in the end learns that there's always hope and it's better to press forward and learn from your mistakes rather than just repeating everything again and again and again. Like this entire game story is just revolve around how to deal with one's own destruction, really, and grief. You see this with Virgil and how he dealt with it in terms of what's her name, Fabronia?
Fabronia.
Yeah, for Bronia's death. And how
I think they did a really great job with Virgil's character in this game.
I will say you do feel how rushed it is in this game. How Virgil gets resolved, like in like I don't want to say quickly, but it is like I thought like he would last a bit longer, being a testament.
Yeah, they definitely you could tell they definitely planned for that to last longer.
Yeah. And let's not forget about the Black Testament.
Yeah, Voyager. Yeah, he was definitely underutilized for sure.
Yeah, he's basically there and then Kanan. Oh my god, I forgot about Kanan. Kanan basically didn't have any role in Xenosaga 2. And in Xenosaga 3, he's basically almost the same, I have to say.
Oh yeah, he's a little more of a prominent role, a little bit, but not
That's
much.
That's like having him on the edge of a cliff, and then in the last game, it's like, okay, you actually got more purpose. You just push him a little back further from the cliff.
Like, and it's a shame though because like with the Testaments, like Virgil, I think that had like he. I definitely think he planned to last longer, but I think that with the time they did give him, especially with him in the past, and showing that he's really not as bad of a guy as he initially let on, that was actually like very touching.
Like seeing Virgil and Fabronia's relationship develop in that small time was really compelling, and made him
like
really
that final scene, like when her spirit comes back.
Like
and
I like Virgil in this game, and Virgil blew up Realians as suicide bombers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, man, it's been a long time since I played 3, and you got to forgive me for anybody who's probably watching this right now. I didn't mention this before. Going off of the fact that off of memory alone, I would love to play the game again, but there's only one problem with that. I don't own the 3rd game anymore. So unlike now I don't really sell my games anymore. Back then I just traded games in and got new games because when you don't have the money, you can't really keep every game that you own. So things are different nowadays, but back then I didn't. And well, I didn't think the game that I bought for $39.99 will end up being $329.99. So would I love to play 3 again? Yes, because I do own 1 and 2. And I've actually found a place that has Xenosaga 3, and I know a place that has several copies of the game. But if I got to pay almost $400 for the game, is it worth me spending $400 to play a game again? I don't know about that. As much as I like 3, I don't think I'd pay $400 for it. So that would just have to be until I find it for a cheaper price.
Hey guys, what do you think of Jin and Margulis' conclusion?
I think that also felt kind of rushed,
Yeah,
but
but you gotta understand, given the circumstances of it being combined
Yeah.
3 games into one, I think it did the best that it could. Ultimately, everything felt rushed in this game. You can even tell how the story was written. It
But
just
yeah,
felt
overall, I
rushed.
think like the overlying theme is how people deal with death, basically in this game, or
Yeah,
like what the death of what they consider their own beings. Like for Shion, it's her own life, and how she's scared and she doesn't know how to proceed, which is why she gets coaxed into Kevin's. Kevin is just basically his like his parents is killed, and everything's shitty. Basically, let's just reset it, man. Fuck Kevin. Well, Hans
well,
like this,
But Kevin had it coming to him. He ended up getting his due
like yeah,
diligence. So,
he doesn't deserve that noble sacrifice bullshit.
well, even though he may not deserve it, I mean, you can say he himself
Yeah.
felt the only way he could
Like and
gain
well,
any
yeah,
sense of respect from anybody was to do what he did. So it wasn't so much that he was doing it out of one last hurrah to gain brownie points from Shion. It was more of,
like he loves Shion. I get that. He's
well,
just a
not even
shitty
just that.
person.
It's more, yeah, it's more of, I think he understood how the reality of the situation, not just for Shion but for everybody. That he just had to do what he had to do. So I mean, that's just what I
At the
think.
end, he lost all hope in the future.
No, I know, I get that. But I'm just saying, like, at least I could see him understanding the seriousness of everything.
You know what
And I
gets
think,
me? You know what gets me about Kevin? He got into this realization when he was just like 12. Never waver from it, apparently.
yeah, how do you go that long having the same?
Like Wilhelm is
Yeah,
understandable since he's basically an omniscient god who's like lived through various universal resets. Well, not really. I think he say he doesn't retain his memories, but he still like lived for a long time throughout the each universe lifespan and reached to that conclusion still.
yeah,
So
but
it's
at the end of the
understandable.
day, Kevin is Kevin, so we can let him be.
But yeah, I
Um,
think the game's overall theme does deal with uh, the death and or what they perceive as the death of their character. Like with Margulis, his whole purpose was to hold up the ideologies of his past people, but then he saw that was a lie, so he decided to stake it all up on a duel with Jin, the one person he knows that won't let him down or disappoint him, like how his own goals were basically a facade. I think the game does a really good job of displaying this theme through its various stories with each of the characters.
hmm
Anything else to add about the story? The sword? Go first.
I will say I think that I think the game has a really really satisfying and strong ending too. I think that the last scenes after the final boss are really emotionally charged, and it does a great job of wrapping everything up.
yeah, when everybody gets to meet at the very end for that last kind of hurrah thing. Yeah, where they all get to kind of talk, and
And like Jin's death especially was like really moving to me, and
that scene with Jin dying really got to me because he finally had that moment to be the brother he really wanted to be to Shion, and ultimately, in the process, he had to sacrifice himself in a sense.
I think something that ends up makes the game kind of look goofy though is the complete omission of all of the blood.
Yes, because of the fact of how they censored the game, not having blood actually makes the game even more crazy.
It makes certain scenes either look confusing or just goofy.
Yeah, yeah. So that
Like with Shion in the past, and she's like holding the blood in her hands, except in the English version she has
She's
nothing in
holding
her
nothing.
hands.
She owns nothing.
So like what is she looking at? What is it?
yeah, you have to
Another,
look at the Japanese version's cutscene to see what she's really
yeah,
looking at.
like the dialogue indicates it, but not the scene itself in the English version.
Or I mentioned it just a minute ago about like Jin's death. Like
Mhm.
he gets stabbed by a giant
Yeah,
sword, and the camera pans to the floor because he like coughs up all this blood.
Yeah.
But in the English version, it just
It's empty.
zooms up on the floor.
Yeah.
There's nothing on the floor. You're like, oh, okay.
I guess the last thing to add for me is like I think the overall story itself, no, not that's just theme, is great in terms of concluding the series. There's literally a lot of shocking revelations, especially in determining where the Gnosis came from.
Yeah, like this game lays out all of its cards on the table. Like every single mystery is completely unveiled to you, and there's no more mysteries to be had once you reach the end of the game. And it does it great. And obviously, despite certain things feeling rushed to the conclusion, they did I honestly think they did like a really great job, all things considered, like with the hand that they were dealt. And I think that overall, the game turned out extremely well.
And here's the thing. Typically, when you don't know if a game's ever going to get a sequel, you get this kind of unfinished conclusion where it's abrupt ending. At least because they knew this was not going to be another game. They was like, let's just go all out. That's how you know there's not going to be another game. When they close up as much of the stuff as they could. But I was happy with the ending of 3. So I really cannot complain. 3 was just a roller coaster ride of emotions filled with sacrifices, people trying to like Xion, and other people trying to like Xion while trying to manipulate Xion. And...
Like, overall, I do think Xion's character makes sense. It's just really frustrating watching her, especially with Kevin.
Yeah, well, you gotta understand. You must not like Kevin, don't you? I mean,
No.
Yeah, because
anybody
of all the people you've mentioned,
like
you mentioned Kevin a lot.
Does anybody like Kevin is the question.
Honestly, I haven't played the game in a long time to know if I don't like Kevin or not, so couldn't tell you.
Piece of shit person.
Hey, you gotta give him credit. The sacrifice was not in vain.
I guess maybe we could say like how would you guys rank the games?
Well, for me, I'm just gonna say 3 and 1 are tied. 2's at the bottom. By combat, in terms of story, 3 will be first, 2 will be second, and 1 will be third. And I only put 1 at the bottom, not because the story is bad, but because that's more of the character building, the world building of everything, than just the mysterious of everything. I think I like 3 story more because it's just so much crazy story climaxes, unraveling the everything that you've tried building up to that point. All the characters who was in all 3 games are coming back in for one last hurrah. Like, there's just so much going on in the story. And of course, you got Telos' a fight with Cosmos. It's pretty epic. 2, I like the story between Junior and Albedo. I think that's really the highlight for me, is that whole build up of Albedo and Junior's story. I like that a lot. So that's where I stand. Personally, though, I like 2 a lot out of the 3 games. I have a sentimental connection to 2 the most.
For me, I think best to worst would be 3, 1, and 2, because 3 has like story wise the highest stakes. And I will say that we're sounding like beating a dead horse here. Like, you could tell that they rush certain things, but overall though, I think that the pacing of the story of 3 was generally actually like very good. It was really mostly the final act that felt the most rushed. I think that's where you could tell that they were kind of rushing the plot points, wrapping them up as fast as they could. But otherwise, I think everything moves like at a pretty silky smooth pace. And I really enjoyed like a lot of the revelations and finding out like again what the Gnosis are, and the ending was very powerful and emotionally charged, and there's a lot of all the character conclusions were very satisfying, and it's just a really an emotional roller coaster of a story, and I just love 3 story all the way through despite some of the rush nature of some things. So I think that 3 takes the cake as a top contender for at least for overall package, I think. And then 1 would be in the middle, and then 2 at the bottom. Really, only because of gameplay, I think.
I would probably say 3, 1, 2 as well.
Well, that's where I differ from everything.
Guess we should quickly go over the rest of the package. Music.
I think man, this is so weird because like they don't have consistent composers. Like, the first game is the only one that was done by Yasunori Mitsuda, and it's a great soundtrack on its own, but there's barely any music.
Soundtrack, like if you listen to the track itself, how it's executed is a bit off in terms like there's no like overworld, like there's no like background music when you're going through the dungeons.
No, there
It's
isn't.
just
Good.
it's just
There,
a lot of
there.
it's just ambient sounds. It's the sound of your
No,
footsteps.
no, no. That's not true. It's air conditioning noise.
There's just like atmospheric music.
No, actually, if you go read about that noise you hear in the game, they actually said specifically that was the music in the game was the air conditioning noise. I'm serious. If you go look it up, there's a file located
I mean, the
in
air conditioning
the
noise is only appears when there's an airship, not when you're like outside.
no. You hear like you actually hear the actual ambient noise. I'm talking about the air conditioning noise as a soundtrack in the game.
Yeah.
It's actually labeled air conditioning
But
OST.
like at the other end of the spectrum, I do appreciate how there's really no music and when you're going through the dungeons just because of how the song Nephilim dungeon is executed.
Yeah, that song's very creepy and
Yeah.
eerie, and it just creates like kind of this
And
tonal
the fact
shift.
that it's the only like dungeon theme in the game is
That and
really
also the
really
final
cool.
dungeon are the only two exceptions
Yeah.
of actual like yeah. I will say it does create like an interesting sense of atmosphere. At the end of the day, I walked away with it from the game kind of indifferent to how they did it. On the one hand, I kind of liked the direction, I appreciated it. On the other hand, I couldn't help but feel that I did wish that there kind of was music at the same time. So I was like super 50-50 on the execution. But overall, I admire what they did. But I'd like the vast majority of the soundtrack is relegated to cutscenes, and like again, like we said before, on their own, the songs are very very good. But like the thing is, when I'm watching a cutscene, I'm focusing on the cutscene, not really listening, paying attention to the music for the most part, unless it's like a recurring song that plays consistently that I know by hearing it. Like in general, I'm not really like listening to the music,
Well,
honestly.
let's be realistic though. The London Symphony Orchestra did a fabulous job to the battle theme.
Oh
So,
man, like oh, that's another one. Like the game has one fucking battle theme,
Yeah.
and for bosses too. Like what the
matter
hell?
of fact, the final boss, you're thinking, I'm gonna finally hear a different song. Nope, it's the same song.
Yeah,
No,
the
no,
final boss
it
has a
is a
different
different
theme.
song. It is a different song in the final
It is a
boss.
different song.
I forgot it was a different song, wasn't it? Yeah,
Yeah, it
That's
is.
the
you're right.
only. But
Like
like for F,
when you fight Albedo, it's the same song, but when you fight like the
it's just after there,
Gnosis at the end, it's a different one.
and it's a great song in its own right. It's a breath of fresh air. But like the thing is, the battle theme on its own is good, but holy hell, did I get sick of it. And I feel like it almost kind of undermines certain encounters later in the game. Like when you're like we mentioned Albedo, right? Like Albedo, there's two phases to the final boss. The first fight is Albedo, and you're like, he's like one of the major antagonists, and then you get into you fight him, and it just plays the random encounter theme. Like it just doesn't really feel like the stakes are that high. You know, what I mean, it just
Hey, it's all about that air conditioning noise, man.
so like I got to a point where I just couldn't stand that song anymore.
It got to the point I just muted my TV. I got tired of hearing the song. I just muted the TV.
I just listen to my own music.
That's one of the reasons I think is Europe missing out on much not getting the first game? Not really. That's why they got that DVD of the first game because it just gives you the cutscenes. It's better than
I
playing the
mean,
game
I
with the
think the
one.
battle system in one is still really fun.
Oh, it is.
Just, yeah.
If you like air conditioning noise in one song, yeah, it's amazing.
In terms of the second game soundtrack,
Oh, it's
um,
amazing, top notch. I love the Duga Duga song that you hear when you
their
go into town.
soundtracks are
I
really
love
good.
the battle theme song. I think it's great. I like the actual victory music you hear when you getting your points at the end. Um, and I think the music overall is just fantastic in the game. I mean, even the cutscenes have vocal songs like the first game did, and they're really good. And then of course, Sword's gonna say
Like
differently.
I feel like so. All right, so Xenosaga 2 is weird because it has two composers. There's Yuki Kajira, who does all of the cutscene music, and she's most famous for like Fate Zero soundtrack and Kara no Kyokai, Madoka Magica. She's a very well renowned
Like,
composer,
I'd say
and
that the
her.
Yuka Kadra tracks are really good. The
Mhm.
rest of the tracks are okay. And there's this really bad track, the sappy music track that plays when.
No, they're not bad tracks.
Yeah, it is. It doesn't match.
Okay, hold on.
It doesn't match the scene at all.
Hold on, how are they bad? Like how?
With Juli Mizrahi and
Yeah.
that scene, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't.
No, they're
match
not.
at all.
No, you talking about that dooga song? You talking about that's bad? No, it's not bad.
Well, that's we're talking about like that we're talking about cinematics. Like that's gameplay.
Yeah.
No, the cinematics are fine. I'm saying y'all saying the in-game music
not
is
when
terrible.
they play that song.
No, that's
the dooga song in the town. You think that was terrible?
yes.
Like, I think
that was not a terrible song.
Music.
Okay, I want you guys to go play one of the main theme town songs, Xenosaga 3, Xenosaga 2, and leave a comment saying you think that song is bad because
I've heard them all. I heard them.
They're not terrible. Okay, what about the battle theme songs? What about the boss battle theme songs?
I like the battle theme. The battle theme is catchy. The battle theme is good.
Good. We can agree on something, dang nabbit. What about the victory theme song?
That one's good too. The boss theme though sounds like something straight out of like Pokemon Coliseum.
Exactly. So at least we can agree that the actual combat music isn't terrible.
Actually, that's something about it too I appreciated though was the variety in the battle themes.
See, going from the first game where you got air conditioning music and one song for like 99% of the game, and we can say 99% of the game because the last boss fight was one different song. So we can at least agree this was variety at its fullest.
Like the overall implementation of a lot of 2's tracks are really
off. It's really off.
No,
Yeah.
they're not. Not when you get the Dugga Dugga song and that one town you go to. No, it's not off. You guys just don't know quality music when you hear it. So, it's okay. It's alright.
3 soundtrack I think is pretty good overall.
Oh, 3's soundtrack is great. It's honestly the balance of everything. I never really found one song to be terrible or one song to be amazing. It was just perfect, like a best blend of everything.
I would say like some of the tracks in 3 doesn't reach the highs of 2's soundtrack, but doesn't go as low as 2's as well.
Well,
It's much more consistent. It's much more consistent.
Here's the thing about 3's music. I don't find a lot of them memorable, but I don't find them horrible. If that makes any sense.
I think like I will say when 3 soundtrack hits, it hits really hard. Like
yes.
One of my favorite tracks in the game is the towards the end when you're fighting Dmitriev. Not in his human form, but like when you're fighting in the ES units. It plays like this really plays like this choir track with some guitar. It kind of reminds me of the final boss theme of Xenoblade Chronicles. That track. It's really, really good.
You know, one of my favorite songs in the game is actually when you first start playing it. You know, when you first start playing the game, you hear that very first song you hear when you start walking around that dungeon area. That do song. That's my favorite. I actually really like that song.
It's like a jazzy kind of track.
Yes, I love that song.
Mm-hmm. And the final boss theme is really good too.
Yeah, that's pretty banging. Plus that song that Telos and Kozos are fighting. You know that Telos song that plays when you have to fight her, it's with Jen and them. I love that song. That one's really good too.
Yeah. 3 soundtrack I think is definitely the most consistent.
Yeah.
And none of the tracks like sound out of place either. So.
No, but that's true. Although 2 soundtrack doesn't sound out of place at all. No.
I played for it recently, and when I heard that track plays in 2, when Ziggy's talking with Momo's mother, he's like, "What is this music? Why is it here?"
It's so bad.
No, it's not. It fits the lore and the theme. That's what I'm saying. You guys, they don't know what they're talking about. They're just saying these songs are bad, but they're really not. They add to the immersion of the story, and that's what I'm trying to get them to understand. But
they don't.
It's okay.
Not that song.
Oh, really? Okay then, Peter. How about you add a link to the song in your description so that everyone can hear the song? Since you think it doesn't add to the immersion.
It's like
I almost guarantee you it does.
It's like an incredibly sappy song for like a situation where they're being much more like somber and talking about how Ziggy's convincing Momo's mother to treat Momo as a second daughter and not just like a replacement for Sakura.
I'm telling you, I'm telling you, the song fits the narrative. The
Uh,
song fits the emotion, the theme of what's going on. And it's supposed to be like that because of the actual just the situation that's presenting itself. So the song really does serve a purpose in that moment.
I don't think so. What would you say?
Right. Let others think their own opinion. Leave a link to the song and let them decide whether that song fits the narrative or not. I'm sure they would agree with me that it fits the narrative perfectly. Right, Sword? Uh,
Swords being
I
silent.
take I take it he doesn't agree with me either. All right. Alone to be alone,
Uh,
apparently.
I think that's all we can talk about Xenosaga, really.
Pretty much, yeah.
I
Yeah,
pretty much skims.
basically,
I
it's a
pretty much
trilogy of great,
skims.
amazing
Yeah.
games.
I pretty much skims 3 story overall, but I think we get the main points in still. At least I think.
Yeah, I mean, because like there's a lot of revelations and
Yeah.
and exposition in 3 that like are it would just the whole video would bog down so
It would
much if
take
we
us
talked about it
about
in 2.
it would take us about 24 hours to explain everything in three. Because it's just so much content.
I mean, like between
Uh,
you go to the past, quote unquote, for a while. You got the whole Dmitry Yuriev thing. You got the whole, Gnosis terrorist attack. Like you got so much stuff in 3
yeah.
that
And let's
like
not forget,
3 story is so in depth that it would almost require its own video to talk about it in
and,
full.
and
Really.
not to mention the UTIC organization has to be explained. I mean, it's yeah.
I think it's overall great series, even if it is flawed in some ways.
hmm
It's only flawed because of budget. Has nothing to do with the
I
fact
think
that
its
it was
greatest
flawed.
flaw was just being too ambitious.
Hmm.
Too ambitious, messing up the freaking characters' faces in the second game.
But like for what we did get, and for what even though their ambition wasn't, their vision wasn't fully realized of what
Hmm.
they initially intended, what we got was still really something special. It was really amazing despite
Yeah.
some of the hiccups.
Hmm.
It's definitely like when you look at the trilogy as a whole, it is like one of my favorite RPG stories. Like it's so thought provoking, dark, philosophical, really interesting characters, an amazingly written story, and lots of crazy plot twists and revelations. And it's so gripping, and it's just one of the most like incredible like RPG experiences I've had in a long time. And I just I like it's so sad that we'll never get that remaster,
Remaster.
that
Yeah.
HD collection. Like, and the only
Hmm.
way people can play now, unfortunately, is to get a PS2 and buy all 3 of them individually.
Either
That's such a bummer.
either that or yeah, use the E word. The
Yeah.
Zohar emulator. Use the Zohar emulator.
Nah,
Nice.
I mean, only. I'm not saying anything. No comment.
Overall, great series. Even though like it gets confusing a bit sometimes, especially the third game where it jumps into the status quo that it is without
Mhm.
you really experiencing it. Overall, a really good set of games, I think. And I think
Yeah,
like
like if
I think this like Xenosaga is like IE failure kind of failure in terms of like it got reduced to 3 games is the reason why like each Xenoblade game now is like its own self-contained story. I think.
I think so too, because I think
Yeah.
that the developers at Monolith realized that kind of wasn't really a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Xenoblade's pretty good too. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, hell, maybe we could make that an episode at some point.
I haven't played it in a long
Yep.
time though, so I don't
Yeah.
remember much of it. I played Xenoblade 2 recently though. Semi recently. I think that's all for today. Thanks for coming, guys. Um, just to give you guys a heads up, this is probably Forrest's last podcast for a while since he's going to go on a business trip for a long while. So next time, you're probably only going to be seeing me and Sword. So,
Yeah, I'm gonna be gone for a bit, so I'll be on a temporary hiatus for a little while.
Mhm.
Um, But yeah, so I do highly recommend the series. If you want to get into some new JRPGs, if you've never had a chance to play Xenosaga 1, 2, or 3, I do recommend it. 2, give it a chance. Don't just write it off where it's bad. Yes, the game has its issues, but you will not regret that the story makes up for it.
Well, that's all for today. This is Peter for 790. It's Cyrus signing off.
Take care, everyone.
Peace.